Now let's talk about women in business. New research from the Pearl Initiative suggests that 80% of women in the GCC say being female has hampered their career. Yesterday I spoke with Imelda Dunlop to find out more and also what can be done to put the situation right. Here's what she had to say.
The number one priority that business leaders should be looking at is flexible working arrangements. Flexible work does not mean less work, but it means measuring people on their outputs and deliverables rather than the amount of time that they're spending at their desk. Other important things are countering negative gender bias within organisations and identifying high potential women, giving them the training, development and career path, projection that they need in order to keep them through those critical years in the middle of their careers.
This doesn't sound like revolutionary stuff. This sounds like best practice that you would hope is being adopted by most, if not all, large and medium-sized organisations here in this region and indeed any region. But the fact is, and the findings of your research are, that it's the exception, not the rule.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, this is a global issue. It's not just something that's specific to the Gulf region. But what is important about this work is that it's really necessary to take a view on this topic and to understand exactly what's going on from a Gulf region point of view. We can't just copy and paste solutions from other parts of the world. We have to understand what the cultural and values of this region are and be conducive to that. So I do think that, particularly if you look at GCC companies, the number of women entering the workforce has increased massively across the GCC over the last few years, and the number of women in tertiary education has skyrocketed as well. But the number of women in senior roles is still stubbornly low.
One of the findings that stood out to me from your survey, there are so many, but here's one. Nearly 80% of the respondents, the women that you spoke to, and there are 600 or so of them across the region, feel that simply being a woman puts them at a disadvantage of work. And this was even more marked in Bahrain and here in the UAE. How does that make you feel?
Well, I think that what this tells us is that there is gender bias within the workplace. Again, this is a global issue. It's not something that's specifically particular to the region. But it is related to issues of acceptance in the workforce and entrenched views that hamper women's career progression. So what is really important is that that there is a tone from the top, that the leader of an organisation is clearly committed to having women in senior roles because there is a business case for it, and that he embeds that throughout the organisation. The pinch point is in the middle ranks where women are most likely to leave. And what organisation leaders must do is identify those high potential women and find ways to keep them through those critical few years, through finding sponsors, through giving them visibility in their roles. And what's really, really important is the relationship with the direct line manager, that person has to be supportive and not have a negative gender bias in order for this to be a success.
Well, talk to me in a bit more detail about that pinch point in the middle ranks. It seems that the mid-rank of a career is probably when women are in their 30s. And again, if we generalise, that's often when some women take time off to have families, to have young children. These two things coincide. Is that just a coincidence, or is it more nuanced than that?
No, you're absolutely right. One of the things that we have found is that at that point in mid-30s, that it is very difficult to achieve a good work-life balance. It's very difficult to do it all. And women are still expected to do most of the domestic and family duties. And in some ways, in terms of social views on women working with families, it's sometimes more acceptable for women to be in caring roles, such as in education or healthcare, and in some ways it's less acceptable in other roles. But these are all things which we need to look at further.
So Imelda, give me some success stories. Give us something to hang our coat on, because there have been success stories. There are role models. There are women who have broken through the glass ceiling and hold senior positions. And there have been men on boards of directors, chairmen, CEOs, who have championed and mentored women. So give me some of those examples.
So there are companies who are doing this really well within the Gulf region. There are companies who have set the tone at the top very, very clearly and are making sure that throughout their senior and middle management ranks, that when they're looking at promotion candidates, that they're ensuring that they're considering women for promotion as well as men, and they're setting targets, and they're looking at the number of women and men at different levels of the organization, because if you're going to set yourself targets and measure something, you're more likely to be able to make it happen. So there are good practices out there, certainly, and with our next piece of work we'll look at documenting and researching and publishing those good practices specifically.
So finally, if there are people listening, men, women, thinking, okay, I get what you say, Imelda, I understand that I'm on board with your goal of getting more women into senior positions, what are the things they should do when they get to the office today? What are the bad practices that they should try to identify in their organisation and stamp out? And what are the good practices that they should embrace?
So the reason that the Pearl Initiative is focused on this topic is because it is about corporate governance. It's about good governance practices, which actually is all about building high-performance leadership teams. So the key thing is to build those management and leadership teams on the basis of the mix of skills and experience that you need, and to be gender blind in that way. And the basis of the business case is that the best companies are run by diverse leadership teams who bring a range of skills and experience to that team.
That's Imelda Dunlop of the Pearl Initiative.